When you get hold of the Nintendo Entertainment System, when you shoot the light-sensing Zapper, you're playing with power.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Player One Start. Today we're going to talk about the NES Zapper.
The NES Zapper, also known as the gun or beam gun in Japan, is an electronic light gun accessory for the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Japanese Famicom. It was released for the Famicom on February 18, 1984, and it was released alongside the launch of the NES in North America in October of 1985. The Zapper allows players to aim at the TV and shoot various objects that appear on the screen, such as ducks, clay pigeons, targets, cowboys, or other objectives. The Zapper is supported on various NES games such as Duck Hunt and Wild Gunman. The Zapper can also be used to move on the title screens. If you shoot off screen, it'll select a different option, and then you point at the screen and it'll select it. An interesting note is that the North American version of the NES Zapper resembled a futuristic science fiction ray gun with a color scheme matching the NES rather than the revolver style of the Famicom version. Even though the early versions of the Zapper were dark gray, the color was changed to a bright orange for safety reasons, as it was believed that a child playing outside with a gray Zapper could be mistaken for handling a real firearm. Later on in the 80s, a company called Entertech got in huge trouble because they made guns that looked very realistic, and unfortunately, kids were actually shot by authorities thinking they were handling real weapons, when in fact they were holding a water pistol. The tech specs of the light gun are actually very low. Believe it or not, the very first home game console came with a light gun. Let's take a look at Duck Hunt as an example. First, everything that I'm about to show you happens in a fraction of a second. As soon as you pull the trigger on the gun, a signal is sent to the NES. Immediately the screen goes black for calibration reasons, and then the next frame shows a white square around where the duck would be on screen. This is actually the only light that the gun senses, and if it can see it, then it means that you're shooting at the right spot. If not, it will continue on to the next screen, which is the background, and the sprite reappears. And of course, if you miss 3 times, you will see the laughing dog, which I'm sure each one of us wanted to shoot at one point in time. However, if you are aimed at the screen correctly, and the gun senses the light coming from the screen, then the next frame will be the death animation for whatever character you're shooting at. Unfortunately, because modern LED screens display things differently than old CRT monitors, these games are not compatible anymore, so you must have a CRT television for these games to work.
So since the NES Zapper doesn't work on modern televisions, this has actually become a rarity these days, and not very many people collect them. Also, I'm not quite sure, but some of these clone consoles that have come out for the Nintendo, I don't know if they're all compatible with them. I know the one that I bought was not. So let's go ahead and dive into some gameplay. I'm going to start with a game that's probably the second best known light Zapper game that came out for the NES. In fact, this game can be seen in Back to the Future Part 2.
This is a video game! I got it working! My dad taught me about these.
I'll show you, kid. I'm a crack shot at this.
You mean you have to use your hands? That's like a baby's toy.
The original version of Wild Gunman was created in 1974 by Gunpei Yokoi, who would go on to create the Nintendo Game Boy. It consisted of a light gun connected to a 16mm projector screen. Full motion footage of a Wild West gunslinger was projected onto the screen. When his eyes flashed, the player needed to draw and shoot faster than their opponent. If the player was fast enough, the projection would change to that of a shot of the gunman falling down. Otherwise, it would show the gunman firing his gun. In 1984, an updated video game version of the game, replacing the photorealistic images with a cartoon-style image, was released for the Famicom. In the NES version, the player also waited for the opponent's eyes to flash, accompanied by a speech bubble reading, "Fire." Interestingly enough, the version used in Back to the Future Part 2 was an unreleased Nintendo Versus Arcade system that was never released. Alright, let's go ahead and pop this game in and see what it looks like. So I had a little trouble capturing this at first, so you'll see me kind of mess around with the settings on my TV a little bit. But right at the last minute I got it working and was able to get the first guy here. So the first mode on here is just you facing off against a single opponent. You're supposed to hold the gun either at your hip, I hold it by my head, until the whites of their eyes flash, and then you can shoot, and then you either win if you get it quick enough, or you lose if you don't. And then you get a bonus for the remaining time. The second version has you face off against two opponents in the same style of gameplay as the first one. You'll notice that the time on each character is different, so you'll have to shoot one before you shoot the other. And that's why I lost on this one, is because I didn't shoot the right one first. The last mode has you fire against opponents that appear in the doorways. And I made it through many rounds of this, but instead of showing you it one by one, I decided to go ahead and speed it up, and it was kind of comical, so I added some music to it as well. That music seems really upbeat for losing, don't you think?
So the gameplay of Wild Gunman doesn't really offer much more outside of a classic arcade shooting game. But as you'll see, this is going to be a constant recurring theme that happens throughout the games we play. Let's go ahead and try Hogan's Alley and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Hogan's Alley was released in 1984 for the Famicom. It was again one of the first games to use the light gun as an input device. The game presents players with cardboard cutouts of gangsters and civilians. The player must shoot the gang members and spare the innocent people. Hogan's Alley was a shooting range on the grounds of a special police school at Camp Perry, which was a training facility for the National Guard. The Special Police School closed during World War II, and in 1987, 3 years after the release of the game, the FBI Academy in Quantico established a small simulated city called Hogan's Alley to serve as a venue for training operations. So as you can see, gameplay is very simple. You shoot the bad guys while avoid shooting the civilians. However, sometimes they look very similar, and I suspect that Nintendo did this to make the game a bit more difficult. However, after a while, you can distinguish the two without too much difficulty. In the second mode of gameplay, you are actually in the back of an alley, and again you are shooting the bad guys while avoiding the civilians. After a little while, your perspective will change and you'll be shown a different part of the alley. In the third mode, you are actually going to be shooting cans. I'm assuming those are soda cans, as this is a Nintendo game. And your goal is to get them over to the end of the screen without them falling off short. Now this became very frustrating, and so I did what I probably did as a little kid when I played this game, and eventually I just stepped forward as close as I could to the screen and just started shooting while almost pressing the gun entirely to the screen. And yeah, I do consider that cheating, but I did want to give you a demonstration of what it looked like when you finally got a can across the screen, because I was not very good at this when I was standing farther back.
So Hogan's Alley is like having a shooting range almost. You have targets that you're shooting at, but you're not actually shooting against real people. I'm assuming that Nintendo made it this way, that you're shooting at targets rather than actual people, to make the game appear more child-friendly. So let's switch to a game where you're actually shooting against real targets.
To the Earth was released in November of 1989 in North America, and in Europe the following year. The object of the game is to destroy incoming enemy spacecraft, bombs, missiles, and asteroids, and etc., without destroying any friendly vessels. Due to the very quick speeds of enemy ships and asteroids, this game is considered to be one of the most challenging Zapper games for the NES. This game requires quick reflexes and good aiming due to the enemy crafts being very quick and very difficult to shoot. So I was only able to show the first level here as I didn't get very far with it, even using my trick about pointing the zapper up against the screen. However, the other level locations include Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, and the final level being Earth. An interesting note about this game is that at the game's conclusion, the player receives a congratulations message from Nestor, who is the president of the Terrestrial Federation of this game.
So after playing through To the Earth, one thing I can say is that my trigger finger is definitely sore. You'll be firing this gun more times than you can count. I think this game may be a bit too fast-paced because you have to press the trigger every single time you want to fire. If you could hold it down, maybe even if you got just a short burst off of it, maybe make it a semi-automatic weapon, it would make the game a little bit more tolerable. But unfortunately, since you have to fire every single time, I don't really find myself coming back to play this one again. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at some other games.
Gumshoe was developed and published by Nintendo and released in 1986 in North America and in Europe in 1988. So the story of this game involves your character, Mr. Stevenson, who is an ex-FBI agent turned detective. He receives a ransom note from a mafia boss, and he determines that he must collect the 5 Black Panther diamonds within 24 hours if he wants to see his daughter again. So the gameplay of this is very simple. Your character walks continuously to the right and will jump if shot at with the NES Zapper. The player must also shoot enemies as they appear on the screen. Shooting the character will not take away from your ammunition. However, when you shoot obstacles or if you miss, a bullet will be subtracted from your total. Grabbing red balloons will add bullets to your arsenal. Alright, that's enough with Gumshoe. Let's go ahead and try a different game. So this game isn't necessarily unique, as it copies the Western theme of Wild Gunman. And the objective of the game is very simple. You shoot the red and white targets on the characters' heads and watch your energy level. It also includes a carnival-style game where you shoot glass bottles in a saloon. However, there's one thing I didn't realize you could do with this game. If you have the NES controller plugged in as well, you can use it to move around the stage. This actually bit me a little bit because I ran out of energy before I was able to shoot enough targets, and there were several times where I was sitting there waiting for something to appear, and nothing ever did. So something tipped me off that maybe I should try using the directional pad on the controller to move around. This is a feature that is unique to this game. Alright, so we're done with shooting range. Let's go ahead and try another one, which is Barker Bill's Trick Shooting. This game was released in North America in 1990. And this game offers about the same amount of gameplay as the other games, only set against the backdrop of a carnival. I'm not sure what makes this last game different from the first one, because it looks exactly the same to me, so eventually I just got bored with it and just started firing at random.
So here are my thoughts on the games that exist for the NES Zapper. I find them fun for a very brief period of time, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then I'm bored of them. And that's me as an adult. As a kid, maybe I would have got a little bit more gameplay out of them before I got tired of them, but I really don't find myself really enjoying them too much now. The game I least enjoyed was Gumshoe. I thought that game was a platformer that should have used the controller rather than the light zapper, and I think they probably knew this, as there is no other game like this. However, the NES Zapper has one game that saves it in my opinion and makes it worth collecting, and that is Duck Hunt. I've already played Duck Hunt in a previous video, and when I restored my NES, it was the first game I was actually looking forward to playing was Duck Hunt, because I hadn't played that game in forever. So if you haven't yet, please go back and watch my NES console restoration video, and you'll see my playthrough of Duck Hunt. So overall, is this device worth collecting today? Well, it's a 50-50 for me. I think that these are cheap enough to where if you want to get one just to display on your wall or in your retro cave, you could probably do that very easily. However, if you're looking for practicality, if you do not have a CRT television, there is no point in collecting these games anymore. Part of the tragedy of the NES Zapper is that most of these games only existed on the NES. The closest I could find to a Duck Hunt sequel was on the Wii Play Disc. There's a little shooting game on there where they have ducks and targets that you have to hit, and it's not really an adaptation of Duck Hunt, but they really do make some nostalgic references to it. For me personally, having grown up with the NES Zapper, playing these games, of course, are a bit of a thrill. I actually set out to collect all these games, and I just recently finished my collection, save for a few.
Most notably, I'm missing Freedom Force.
The games I included in this video exclusively rely on having the NES Zapper. There are a few games out there that have the option of using the NES Zapper, and I didn't include that in this list because I really wanted to focus on the exclusive games. Maybe I'll save that for another video in the future. Okay, well that'll wrap it up for this video. Remember, if you like what you see, please hit that like and subscribe button, share with a friend. You can reach out to me on my website, Facebook, Twitter, or the various social media that's out there. I want to thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I'll see you guys next time.